Okay, next we move on to deductible expenses. Again, this is a further criteria that we need to look at whenever we want to determine is it deductible expenses or not. So there are some basic asset tests. So if in the business income you have asset tests based on the certain criteria. So the same thing with the business expenses. So we do have certain criteria to determine that whether that expenses is actually deductible or not. Okay, first one, if you refer to para 7.0, your page, textbook page 235, you will see that capital expenditure and revenue expenditure. This is the main or the core basis that we need to use in order to determine whether is it a deductible expenses or not. Is it capital expenditure or revenue expenditure? In general, capital expenditure will not be deductible. However, revenue expenditure would be deductible. Okay, how do we know whether it is a capital expenditure or is it a revenue expenditure? Right, so there are some criteria that normally derive from the previous cases, okay, because it's more or less common law. So based on the act and also based on the previous cases, okay, there are some criteria that we need to look at in order to determine whether is it a capital expenditure or revenue expenditure. Okay, the first one, 7.1, is talking about enduring benefit assets. So sometimes when if you notice, when you buy something, okay, you just buy one-off use. Okay, you just buy one-off use of the services. After that, it is gone. Right? However, sometimes you incur to buy certain item, and this item can be used over and over again, over a few years or several years. Okay, for instance, like assets. Okay, you do incur your expenditure in regards to buy the assets. However, do you use your assets only once a year? No, most of the time. Okay, we're talking about in general, asset will be used over more than one time. So as a business, you need to recognize that, okay, as a capital assets, right? So however, sometimes for certain company, they do have policy that let's say if they buy certain furniture which is less than 2,000, normally these expenses will be expensed off in the P&L, meaning that it will not be captured as their fixed asset. However, it will be just like expense off, mean it will appear in the P&L during the year that when it is incurred as part of the operating expenses. So that's why if you do the audit of a fixed asset section, normally you will go through revenue and maintenance account. Alright, you will actually scrutinize, is there any capital expenditure that might incur? Sometimes they buy a small table. Alright, however they expense off, so they recognize that as their part of their expenses. So in that case, from the tax point of view, alright, these expenses can be recognized as a capital expenditure, therefore you add back and later on you claim as part of your capital allowance. Okay, so that is number one. Okay, number two, 7.2 is the talking about fixed capital or circulating capital. Alright, if you're talking about capital expenditure, of course you buy something that is fixed. Okay, however, if let's say the things that you buy is actually being rotated. Okay, circulated means being rotated, because if you're talking about a business, okay, if you buy an asset, you will use over and over several years. So you only buy one time. Right? However, if you buy stocks, okay, you buy stock, what do? Did you just buy once or every single month or every single day? Okay, of course, stock is used for is the purpose is actually for you to sell. Therefore, most of the time stock will come in many times. Okay, so there is a circulating, okay, like working capital, right? It's been rotating. The capital is actually, or the expenditure is actually, you buy, you sell, you get money, and then you buy again. So there is a circulation of capital. So in that case, that expenditure will be treated as a revenue expenditure. Okay. And then 7.3 is actually talking about whatever expenses that you incur, especially when talking about assets. Okay, it must be something that related to tangible and also not tangible. Okay, as long as you can prove that it's fall under capital expenditure, therefore it will be non-deductible. The next one, 7.4, is talking about business structure versus business process. Alright, so business structure, what happens is that when you buy something or when you incur something to make or to generate business income. For instance, okay, in this example, in this textbook, they give example about profit making apparatus. Okay, for instance, if you want to sell burger, right, can you just open table? Then after that you buy bread and then you buy your burger and then you put everything in one sheet and then you sell. No, right? You have to cook. So in order to cook, you need to have the stove, right? And then you need to have the stall, right? You need to have all the rack and so on, so on. So in other words, you need to have some kind of items, right, to set up your business structure. So in other words, whenever it is related to the business structure, normally it will be recorded as a capital expenditure. However, if it is recorded, identified under business processes, therefore, it will be deductible. Okay, so that is actually talking about business process and business structure. Okay, 7.5 is actually talking about initial expenditure. Okay, when talking about initial expenditure, initial means first time. Okay, the first expenditure that incurred. So in general or normally, the first, okay, or the first initial expenditure, or the first expenditure, okay, that normally incurred will be recognized as a capital expenditure. Okay, alright, so those are some of the criteria that normally we use in order to recognize whether that particular expenditure is actually deductible or not deductible. Okay, the next one will be, number 2 will be rental. Okay, what about rental? Rental is actually, you're talking about rental expenses, right? So that means you pay to your subsidiary or you pay to your third party. Okay, so basically it's payable for immovable properties and also payable for movable properties. Okay, so what will happen is that when you have rental expenditure, okay, of course it must be deductible when you have used something. Okay, you have used something, and for instance you borrow the machine, so you use the machine to produce business income. So in other words, okay, you can justify that you buy that whole amount, let's say 1,000. The whole amount 1,000 is actually for the purpose to set up the business. Okay, so in other words, in this case, it will be deductible. Okay, then after that, you would have advance rental. So advance rental is the rental expenses from, for you, is actually rental expenses where you receive, you are going to receive in future, or you're supposed to receive for the back 3 years, for instance. Okay, so so when you have advance rental, that means you receive advance for future. Okay, so going back to the derivation or the basis of derivation, normally we would recognize our income based on the first day or the day or the basis, the day that in which basis period that you receive. Okay, so it must be really back to the basis period. Alright. Okay, so that's talking about rental. The next one will be repairs and renewal. Okay, repairs and renewal, of course, in general, you're talking repairing, you're talking repainting. Okay, so normally this amount will not be deductible. Okay, sorry, will be deductible. Alright. So, however, sometimes you might have incurred in relation to your repairs and renewal or maintenance. However, there are some element of improvement. For instance, your wooden door is actually broken. So what happened is that the school replaced with the glass, okay, not tinted, totally brand new. So in this case, whatever amount that you incurred for that particular door, okay, will be capital expenditure. Therefore, it will not be deductible. Okay. So if you can further refer in your textbook when talking about repairs and renewal in detail. Okay, so in general, they also come up with the basis whether that expenses that rental expenses will be deductible or non-deductible. And then if you see later on the page 244, para 10.5, it's talking about assets replacement. So this is actually talking about entirety or part of entirety. Okay, because sometimes when you repair, you actually more or less create like something new. So this one you have to be careful. Is it part of the expenses will be capital expenditure or not? Okay, the next one will be okay, if we refer to your textbook, para 10.11, 11.0, talking about bad debts and doubtful debts. Okay, this one I already mentioned, just a quick one. Okay, bad debts. Okay, first thing that you have will be debtors or receivable. Then after a while, you notice that they cannot pay. They start slowing down to pay their rental. So you will recognize. So now it becomes non-collectible. Okay, so once it becomes non-collectible, you will make a provision for doubtful debts. Okay, so in general, provisions will be non-deductible just now, right? Okay, so in that case, after a while, you would notice that the debts that has been provided for, has actually turned out in